Welcome to Colonie TV, the governmental educational channel for the town of Colonie.
Hello, I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and welcome to Benchmark. We'll explore a variety of issues involving our legal system, our justice system, and how they relate to the citizens of the town of Colonie. Today, we are truly fortunate to have as our guest Federal District Court Judge Mae D'Agostino. As many of us know, the federal court system is clearly the most important court system in the United States, and we are very fortunate to have Town of Colonie resident Mae D'Agostino as one of our federal district court judges. And Judge, thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome, Peter.
This is, I have to tell you, this is a highlight of the Benchmark programming to be able to have you with us. Just considering the time that you could give us today is a real challenge for you with all of your judicial duties. But your commitment to the town of Colonie over the years has been truly outstanding. And I have to tell you, we're also pleased that you're here today to tell us something about the federal court system. And there's so much to talk about. And of course, this show today couldn't do justice to the length and breadth of your practice and your service as a federal district court judge. And it goes back, I first met you when I was a town attorney in the early 80s at Town Hall, and you were a practicing attorney at that time, helping the town in a connection with a variety of insurance and litigation issues at that time, Judge. And then now, here we are on the eve of your 3-year anniversary as a federal district court judge.
Yes, indeed. Friday, it will be 3 years.
Well, Judge, it's so fabulous, and we're thrilled. There's so many things to chat about in connection with the federal system. And I think one of the things that many people find interesting is, what is the process for becoming a federal district court judge? How do you do that?
Well, Peter, it is a rather rigorous process to become a federal court judge. I can attest to that. In my own case, it began with being recommended for a judgeship by Senator Chuck Schumer. And I must say that when I learned that Senator Schumer had recommended me, I was just amazed, and I felt very humbled and very honored. But I soon learned that there was much more to go on after that. After the recommendation, I actually had to be vetted very carefully by Senator Schumer's office, even further than Senator Schumer had vetted me initially. And then I had to be vetted and carefully looked at by the FBI. I had members of the FBI calling my neighbors in Colonie and asking questions about me, which made some of my neighbors a little nervous. I had to be carefully examined by the American Bar Association, because the American Bar Association rates federal judicial candidates as not qualified, qualified, or well qualified. So an individual from the Bar Association came to my office and spent quite a number of hours with me, asking me about my career and all of the things that I had done. Additionally, there's a great deal of paperwork that has to be done, and really your life becomes an open book from the time you are 16 years old up until the time that you are recommended by the senator. After all of that, I also had to be vetted by the White House. So I had to go down to Washington, D.C., and I was interviewed by White House staff. They wanted to, of course, know about my career, my background, all of the things that I had done. Ultimately, after many, many months, I was I was nominated by President Barack Obama for the position, but I was still not finished because, as many of your viewers might know, after being nominated by the president, you still have to be confirmed by the Senate. So I actually had to go to Washington and appear before the Senate Judiciary Committee. and answer questions at a public hearing regarding my qualifications. And that ended with me going to Washington to actually watch the vote on my nomination. And I was very, very fortunate to be nominated by a vote of 88-0, watching in the Senate gallery.
Well, that's such a fabulous story, and just underscores the in-depth review that any potential candidate to serve on our federal bench undergoes. It's there's a lot there, and obviously the Senate and unanimously chose you, and they chose well.
Well, thank you, Peter. I think one of the reasons the process is so important and so thorough is that federal judges sit for life. Unlike state court judges who have finite terms and will complete the term and then perhaps run again, federal judges sit for life during what we call their good behavior. And I think the founders felt that since we have so many important issues to work with, it's very important that we not be bound by any political party, that we be able to do always what we think is right. And that's one of the reasons that we sit for life.
Well, it's certainly been your hallmark as well, and the federal bench certainly is involved in so many different aspects of life, and so many significant decisions since the founding of our country have emanated from our federal system. And there are, during your trial practice, during your distinguished career in private practice, which was underscored by you serving as the chair of the trial lawyer section of the state bar. And of course, we in the Albany County Bar Association are so pleased that you are a member of our association as well. But you had a distinguished trial practice, both in state courts and no doubt in federal court as well. Are there sharp differences in the style of practice between state trial practice and federal trial practice?
Well, you know, that's a very interesting question. I think, and I try to tell young lawyers this all of the time, if you can practice in state court, you can absolutely practice in federal court. I think the difference is that in federal court, because we're dealing with constitutional issues often, it's very important that the person who's going from state court to federal court know precisely what the constitutional issue is, know what types of cases federal court has jurisdiction over and what cases you don't have jurisdiction over. And of course, in federal court, we have different rules of evidence and different rules of procedure. So I tell all young lawyers, don't be afraid to come to federal court, but make sure you know the federal rules, the rules of evidence, and the local rules. Now, state court practitioners might be dealing with matrimonial issues, automobile accidents, personal injury cases, adoption issues. But as I said earlier, in federal court, we are dealing with constitutional questions, federal crimes. So on a given day, I might be dealing with an employment discrimination case where someone is claiming I lost my job because of my age or my gender. I might be dealing with a federal crime where someone has sold or transported drugs over a state line. I might be dealing with a free speech issue where someone is claiming that my free speech was chilled. We also handle bankruptcy matters in federal court, and there's just a great deal of variety in federal court.
Well, the court's also extended itself in so many ways to the education and the benefit of young attorneys as well. It wasn't that long ago, just a month or so ago, I was down when my oldest daughter was being admitted to federal practice, and you and your colleagues hosted a beautiful event for them and instilled in them the significant issues that are laid out here in federal court and welcomed them to practice here as well. And that's certainly very kind of the court to do, to make sure that young attorneys know that they're certainly welcome here And you did that perfectly the day that I was there watching Carol's admission.
Well, thank you. And I really enjoyed meeting your daughter, outstanding young woman. And I will say that one of my favorite things as a federal court judge is to welcome new young lawyers into our court. And we also, this might be of interest to your viewers, we also have a program where we welcome students into the courtroom. I have lectured to Cub Scouts, elementary school students, middle school students, high school students. If anyone wants to bring their students to the courthouse to learn about federal court, we are happy to have them. They just simply have to call the courthouse, tell us what their needs are, and we always try to accommodate children. If we don't teach our children about the justice system, then I think we're failing them.
Well, and I agree with you wholeheartedly in that way as well. And you and I both look forward to continuing our education process. If lawyers and judges don't take up the obligation to teach civics and to teach about government and the judiciary, I'm not sure as we move forward that we can merely depend on the education system. I think lawyers should also be a part of that process to be able to establish and remind everybody that it is a noble profession and we need to teach it to others as well. And I'm not sure that we can just depend on institutional education to do that. It's giving by you and by others, other attorneys that actually carry on the knowledge of what's significant and the basic foundation of our country and democracy. And the judicial branch is vitally important. And we can thank John Marshall at the federal level for making sure that certain issues were the domain of the federal court.
Absolutely.
Now, I see sometimes, I'll read in the newspaper about a variety of criminal cases that end up in the federal system. And I imagine it's because the federal prosecutor is bringing a prosecution there. Would you say that there's a large majority of your caseload involves criminal cases, or not necessarily?
Well, I do have a very significant criminal caseload, and as you mentioned, those are cases that are prosecuted by the United States Attorney Rick Hartunian in the Northern District of New York. And the types of cases that I generally see, Peter, involve, unfortunately, drug sale cases, drug possession. We get a number of white-collar type crimes in our courthouse where individuals may have embezzled monies, and the monies have transferred to different states by wire transactions. We also have a very significant amount of prisoner litigation in the Northern District, which many people don't realize, but prisoners have constitutional rights, and when they feel that those constitutional rights have been abridged, they go ahead and bring civil cases in the courthouse. But we do have a very active criminal docket, and that includes individuals who illegally enter the country through various points, whether it be up in the North Country or over the Mexican border. So we're very, very busy with our criminal cases for sure.
And Judge, sometimes I'll see in connection with criminal cases and sentencing in connection with criminal cases that the courts often refer to, the federal courts refer to sentencing guidelines. And I was wondering whether those are mandatory, that you must follow a certain penalty, or whether you have some flexibility, or has it changed over the years?
That's a great question, Peter. I know that before I became a federal judge for many years, sentencing guidelines, which are just what they sound like. They're guidelines which point a judge to what an appropriate sentence is for for a particular crime. And for many years, those were mandatory. So if someone was found guilty or had pled guilty to a certain offense, a judge would absolutely have to follow that guideline and sentence the individual to a certain number of years. But the law has changed, and now those guidelines are what we call advisory. So while we take them into account, now federal judges have the authority in certain situations to depart from the guidelines, and if we feel that for any reason the guidelines are too harsh, if we give a significant enough reason why we're departing from the guidelines, we may consider the certain factors about the individual defendant. And I think most judges feel a little bit better about that because we can use some of our discretion in fashioning the sentence. So sometimes we might provide for a sentence that is greater than what the guidelines call for, or one that is less than what the guidelines call for, when we take into account all of the circumstances of the particular defendant and the crime.
And Judge, in connection with the variety of your cases, I've come to learn that it appears the federal system, the federal court system, is highly electric. I would call it electronic, and the use of electronic transmission, and including sometimes, it seems to me that certain appearances are done on video, and for a variety of reasons, and maybe distance and security are for some of the reasons why you would incorporate video in a variety of ways. And of course, locally, I have been publicly advocating for the use of video arraignment in a connection between our Albany County Correctional Facility and our town court, so that if a defendant is brought over to the correctional facility in the middle of the night, that they could get access to me early in the morning in order to have a review and an arraignment and bail set for them as quickly as possible to ensure their access to freedom and liberty as soon as possible. And of course, we recognize that the sheriff enjoys it because it might mean that they don't have to do the transporting of people from the correctional facility around the county. It saves time and money as well. And I was wondering whether you've seen the use of video in the federal system in any way.
I absolutely have, and I would begin answering your question by saying, and first and foremost, we always have to be concerned about the constitutional rights of the accused. And one of those constitutional rights, as you point out, is the right to bail. And it's something that I'm sure you face every day when you're on the bench. And in federal court, we are very fortunate to have very good technical services, and it's not unusual at all, for example, if a defendant has been arrested in Plattsburgh and the public defender and the assistant United States attorney are in Plattsburgh, I will often take a plea of guilty from an individual by video from Plattsburgh. We actually have a video conference room in the federal courthouse, and as long as I state on the record, I will ask the defendant, are you waiving your personal appearance before me? Right. And that defendant says that yes, he or she is. We proceed with the sentencing. The other good thing, not the sentencing, I mean the plea. I do still sentence people in person, but we also have to think about judicial resources, and in addition to helping a defendant take a plea, or in your case, if you were doing it in justice court, setting bail early, we also save resources. And in these tough economic times when, the judicial branch is struggling as well as other branches, anything that you can do, if you can save time and money, I think that's what people are trying to do. So we do use video conferencing in federal court quite a bit. We even use it in front of jurors. If it's going to be too difficult, for example, to get an inmate from a prison into the federal courthouse, we will set up a camera at the prison facility and have the inmate testify by video, even to a jury.
Well, I think implementing technology can enhance justice and make it more readily accessible to those who are in the justice system.
Oh, I think so too.
And we'll continue at all levels to advocate that type of using that technology to help people get through and get processed through the system. Judge, we all know there's so many federal cases that have changed the course of history and how the criminal justice system, for instance, among others, has worked. And of course, I have a very busy criminal calendar myself. Last year, at the end of 2013, the Office of Court Administration listed Colonie as the 25th busiest criminal court in the state of New York of fingerprintable offenses.
Amazing.
And we're still laboring in a footprint of part-time justices and of a footprint of 50 years ago. And of course, I've been advocating for broad changes here at the local level as well to address this situation as we move forward. But the federal system has had some celebrated cases overall. And I was just down at Albany Law School 2 nights ago addressing a law fraternity that I was a founder of 35 years ago, Phi Alpha Delta. And they had me come out to make a little speech about how we got it started 35 years ago. But I look at the things that they were doing, and last Friday they were celebrating with the Criminal Justice Society the Gideon case.
Yes.
And the right to counsel. And Judge, that's had quite an impact on our criminal cases, both federally and state. What was involved in what is that about, and what ruling finally led us to where we are today?
Well, you know, in the case of Gideon versus Wainwright, an indigent was essentially being asked to go through the criminal justice process without the assistance of an attorney. And the court took a look at that and said, you know, and I'm making this simplified, but if people who have money have access to an attorney, and when your life and liberty can be at stake, right, why shouldn't people who don't have money have access to an attorney? And it's one of the most important cases, I think, in the history of the United States. And I'm sure you routinely appoint counsel for indigents.
Daily.
And I do also. If any criminal defendant can prove that he or she is indigent, they don't have to go through the process without an attorney simply because they do not have wealth. And I think that is one of the major cases of the federal system. I think that the right to remain silent, Miranda versus Arizona. And every time I have a criminal trial, I remind the jurors of that right, that the government has the burden of proof in every single case, that it's not up to the defendant to disprove his or her guilt, and that silence cannot be used against an individual in our court system.
And of course, so many other notable cases that have changed the way our society has advanced, and including Brown versus Board of Education, Roe v. Wade.
Absolutely.
They've all had an impact.
They certainly have. And I will say this about federal court cases, and particularly Supreme Court cases, because I'm at the district court level, so I am a judge at the trial level. Appeals from my court go to the circuit court in New York City, known as the Second Circuit. And of course, appeals from the Second Circuit go to the United States Supreme Court. And Roe versus Wade, a very controversial case. It remains controversial today, where our Supreme Court said that a woman has a constitutional right to privacy and therefore a constitutional right to have an abortion. Brown versus Board of Education, where our Supreme Court ruled that segregated schools are not equal schools. So, you know, even, you know, those older cases can still be hotly disputed today, but we certainly cannot dispute the role of the courts in dealing with some of the most controversial cases that this country has, controversial issues that this country has ever known.
Well, and it even continues today. Just some weeks ago, during a benchmark, we were talking about a case that just came out concerning funding of political campaigns, and the Supreme Court came out with a decision regarding that, and finding that limiting the number of candidates you can give to might be a violation of your freedom of speech.
I read that, and some of those types of cases come before me. So I think, other than saying that I read about that, right, I won't comment further.
No, and I wouldn't want you to do that. But and I know that that may have impact on various state regulation in the same way too as we move forward. Oftentimes the Supreme Court may speak, and it causes the states to also modify the way they look at issues as well.
For sure.
As we move forward. So that we'll wait to see how that is moving forward, and in that way. So nonetheless, I know that I had a guest on not too long ago who was very involved in developing a celebration for what he told us was the first federal judge appointed by George Washington, and his name's James Duane. And we came to learn, of course, that Duanesburg is named after James Duane, and he's an ancestor of a former guest that we had on this television show, James Featherstonhaugh. And I believe that Mr. Featherstonhaugh told me that you are working on a recognition of Judge Duane as well, and a celebration of him being the very first federal judge. What's about that, Judge? Tell me about it.
Well, I'll tell you about it. It's very exciting, and I should begin by saying that Jim Featherstonhaugh and his wife Barbara have been so gracious to me and to the Northern District Federal Court Bar Association. Now, we had a very revered and special judge in the Northern District by the name of Judge Minor. And not only was Judge Minor a federal district court judge, but he went on to become a judge of the Second Circuit and was actually even on a short list at one time for the United States Supreme Court. Judge Minor wrote a history of the court, and your viewers could actually see it on the website of the Federal Court for the Northern District of New York, where he sets forth, in my view, rather clearly that Judge Duane was the first federal court judge in the United States, and he disputes that any other court can lay claim to being the mother court. We know through our contacts that those in the southern part of the state believe that they were the mother court and that they may be having a celebration in the fall. So we decided to have a celebration in June.
Good.
Celebrating the Northern District as the mother court. And it's thanks to Jim and Barbara Featherstonhaugh, we're actually bringing the members of the bar down to, out to Judge Duane's estate in Duanesburg. We're going to go to Judge Duane's burial site and take a tour of the church where he is buried. And we're also going to be looking at artifacts from Judge Duane, various letters that he's written over the years. And we're just so thrilled to have this celebration. It won't be all history. We're going to have some cocktails and some food, and it will just be a great time to celebrate the life of Judge Minor, to review the history of the court, and for all of us to have a collegial evening together and to beat the Southern District at it.
And you're doing well. And of course, Judge, how many districts are there totally in the United States of America?
We have 93 districts, Peter, and the number of judges varies from district to district.
Well, certainly it's a rare indeed to have a federal district court judge. It's probably the most exclusive group of judges in the United States, and we're very fortunate to have Judge Mae D'Agostino, Colonie town resident, as one of our federal court judges. It's really a treat, Judge, to be able to have this opportunity, and I know the citizens of the town are so very proud to be able to call you their own as a result.
Thank you, Peter. It's very kind.
Well, you're very nice to join us today, Judge, and of course, as we recognize, we couldn't, there's not nearly enough time to be able to celebrate the life of Judge Mae D'Agostino, but your offer to have students come visit you at the federal courthouse is certainly something that I'm sure many will do as they move forward, and you've already had so many come visit, and you extend yourself into the community in so many ways. You're really the essence of someone that gives back to the community every single day.
Thank you. You're very kind.
And thank you, Judge, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
I'm Colonie Town Judge Peter Crummey, and thank you for joining me on Benchmark.